my very good friend Amanda in the house. Amanda has a very unique story, but not so unique anymore with the advent of 23andMe. She has recently found out that she had an addition to her family, and we're going to dive into that a little bit later on. But Amanda, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me today.
Of course.
Very excited to hear your story. I know there's a lot of people out there who are now finding themselves in the same situation you have recently found yourself in. But before we jump into that, I would like to get a little bit of information about who you are, where you're from, where you grew up.
So I was born in Santa Barbara, California, and lived there a couple years. Then we followed my grandparents from my mom and dad and grandparents all lived in Laguna Beach. When my grandparents moved, they moved to Southern Oregon. And so years later, my mom, dad, and I followed them up there, which I'm so thankful for because I get to claim Oregon. So I grew up in Oregon. I grew up mostly with my mom. My dad was kind of in and out of the picture due to addiction and things like that. But I have a wonderful mom. I had a great, growing up with her. And then, I've lived all over, gone different places. Currently, I'm living in Las Vegas right now. But within the next year, be moving back to Oregon. So I'm so excited to come back.
That's very exciting. We are
Ah,
excited to have you back in the area. So you're raised in Southern Oregon. You graduated from high school here, and then where did your adventures take you?
So I went to University of Oregon in Eugene. I lived there for my first part of college. Then I moved back briefly, and then I started to kind of explore what I might want to do. I did some shadowing of some different professions, got to watch some different surgeries, things like that. And somebody, I don't even remember who it was, but they're like, "What did you want to be when you were growing up?" And I said, "Well, I wanted to be a pirate for a really long time. So I don't really feel like that's something I can pursue these days." Um, but I did weirdly really like going to the dentist. And that's not like a common thing. I had a lot of dental problems when I was growing up. I didn't have cavities, but I was genetically missing some teeth. Up until the age of 16, I was missing my two front lower teeth. And then my two side teeth on the top were basically non existent looking.
So I mean, TMI, but did you get implants?
So
Or-
what they did with braces was they used braces and they moved my space from the front over to the side. And I was too young to get an implant. Also, we couldn't afford it. So
Yeah,
I have a bridge right there. It was a temporary type bridge. And they said, as soon as you're old enough, get an implant. Well, I'm 39 and I've had this same temporary bridge since I was 16.
is
I'm
it
strong.
removable?
No.
No, it's permanent.
Yeah. And then I ended up having a little bit of surgery on the top just to lengthen, and I have crowns, and you would never know.
Beautiful.
For a lot of people, teeth are a very like emotional thing. They make you feel like you are like received by others. They play a lot into your self-esteem. So the reason I liked going to the dentist was it was should have been scary and uncomfortable. And instead they greeted me, they called me Miss America. And
Oh,
they'd say, it'll all be worth it someday. Like you're gonna have a beautiful smile. And they really were like some of the only people that built my self-esteem. And I always thought like, oh, that was such a cool feeling. So when I decided to go into the dental field, that was why. It was because of my dentist. I ironically don't remember the dental hygienist, which is what I do now. But the dental assistant and the dentist were like just a huge part of my life. And that's why I went into dentistry. I realized that I needed to move to Klamath Falls, Oregon. They were the only, I don't know if they still are, but at the time, they're the only school in Oregon to offer a Bachelor of Science in dental hygiene. So if I was going to do this school thing again, I was like, I'm going to do it right. And so I moved to Klamath Falls. I worked on getting some of my prerequisites and eventually I got in to the hygiene program there. I was actually waitlisted, which I remember getting the thing because I'd already put up a year of my life in Klamath Falls. And
oh
I
my gosh.
remember getting the letter that was like, you've been waitlisted. And I was like,
Oh.
no. And so I called the school and I'm like, can you tell me what number I am? And they were like, no. Eventually I found out I was the first alternative. So
Oh, wow.
I eventually got in. And then I had like a mission to prove. I ended up becoming class president. From then on, I was on a mission to prove like I was worthy enough for that position. And then after that, I want to go somewhere. So I looked up different countries that had a working shortage list. Every country has like certain professions that allow you into the country with ease. So there was a list of them. A lot of them I didn't speak the language. So I went to the first one that did speak English, and that was New Zealand. And that's how I ended up on that road of my life.
So you traveled to New Zealand. Did you meet anybody over there?
Yes. So I ended up meeting my now husband, Ryan. And that decision was really hard that last year of school to work with the different countries. It was very difficult to get my work visa and all of those things. And that was one of the hardest things that I had to work on all by myself in life. And I remember thinking, if I can do this, and without any guidance and teach myself how to do this, like I can do anything. So even though it was so hard, it's something that I've thought about like many times through my life that have gotten me through like tough times.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you went to New Zealand. You met your husband.
We came back to the States. We decided that his visa didn't go through. So we decided that we loved each other. We've been dating and all that. So we would get married. You can't leave the country when your visa is pending, a fiance visa. Once that's processing, you can't leave the country. So I think we were apart maybe for 6 months or so before he could come back. It was
Oh,
something like
wow.
so long. And then once he came back, we had 2 weeks to get married, but you don't find out that you can come back until like right before. So he got back and we're like, oh, we have to get married like right away. So we decided to get legally married, but not have our family involved because his family couldn't make it. And we didn't feel like it was fair if my mom got to be there. And so we just decided to get married in our friend's backyard.
Nice.
Um, Tim and Janie had got married just a few weeks prior. So they had some extra wedding decorations around, and Tim's dad is a pastor. So we set up a little thing. We invited a couple friends. We said, hey, dress nice and come over to Tim and Jandy's house at 5 o'clock. We have a surprise. So we had a couple friends show up, and surprise, it was our wedding.
They
So
didn't know.
yeah, they had no
Yeah,
idea.
that was pretty funny because I
Yeah.
mean I was pretty new to meeting Ryan, and then
Yeah.
unfortunately he had a rough day that day afterwards, and
Oh,
wound up
I
going.
forgot about that. Apparently, our food isn't quite the same quality here as New Zealand. And the day that we were getting married, he had some intestinal issues. And as soon as we got married at your house, we left your house and went straight to the emergency room where he thought he was dying. So the person that checks us in goes, okay, what's going on? I explained to him that my husband of 1 hour has been eating Taco Bell for 10 days straight.
Your
And the guy
husband
goes,
of 1 hour.
yeah. The guy goes, okay, so here's what we're going to do. You're going to check in. You're going to leave your name here and you're going to wait for your name to be called. And, basically he's telling us like, leave,
Yeah.
because they were going to have to do heart tests and catheter, like all this stuff. And so the guy was really kind. So we left. Ryan survived. He was totally fine. He took a break from Taco Bell and the world went on.
So during this whole process, I mean, your dad's around, you've been
Yeah.
visiting with him, you're an only child, grew up an only child. How's your relationship with your dad?
Well, he's dead.
Well, well, so how was your relationship with your dad?
I got
Sorry to,
it was interesting to say the
yeah.
least. So the way I thought about my dad, that I feel like in my life I was given an ability to deal with things, and I don't know why I do know why I was given it, but I didn't realize at the time. So I from a young age was able to deal with things that a lot of adults couldn't deal with. And in my mind, I reframed my dad as like a crazy old man that was my friend. And so it was a way that I could deal with the things that would happen with him and like to me and all that in a way that wouldn't make me like a prostitute, like a prostitute, stripper doing heroin.
Yeah.
So it really gave me like boundaries in my mind for how I would let him affect me. So my dad, from a very young age, had a problem with addiction. I now know and believe that he was just self-medicating. And at the time, there was no real resources for people that had, you know, mental issues. And so he later in life got diagnosed. I know that terms of diagnosis have been changed, but at the time I was told it was that he was bipolar. And at that point, he'd been diagnosed with mild schizophrenia. I believe that mild schizophrenia part came on from extensive drug use. I
Yep.
think it like fractured a part of him, but that's what I
Was he
think.
a big marijuana guy?
He was. And that was actually something that was helpful to him. It
Yeah.
was something that calmed him. It was something that later in his life, he was in a lot of pain. It helped with pain. Marijuana was something I never looked at it as negative. However, as an adult, I associate that smell with being wrong and
Yeah.
almost sinful because it was so strong in these certain situations in my life that smell often associates experiences for me.
The reason I ask that is because, I mean, there's studies now that say people who have a predisposition for schizophrenia, if they smoke marijuana early on when they're younger, it can actually exacerbate that. I don't know how recent the studies are, but I know
Yeah.
that they say if you're young and you have a history in your family to stay away from marijuana at least until you're later on in life.
So interesting you bring that up because I recently was going through all my dad's stuff and I found like it's almost like a scroll. He in rehab one time, I'm sure they had asked him, he wrote like a line by line of every like major event in his life from being born to whatever. And very early in his life, it literally says, I discovered marijuana.
Wow.
So he started smoking very, very young. I don't, how they say like, oh, whatever's the gateway to whatever. I feel like
Yeah.
you always make choices and things can happen to you. Like you're in a car accident, you have to start taking pain pills because you're in so much pain. And then you get addicted and it's basically like heroin. So I understand that things happen to people in certain ways. But for my dad, it went from that to like cocaine to like all the different things. And, being in the 70s, things like LSD or those types of things, I feel like they have a time and a place. But when you're doing like maybe multiple things layered on each other, it's probably not a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. My brother, he was kind of the same way. I mean, we have a history in our family of mental health issues, and he started smoking probably when he was 17, 18, 19.
Mhm.
And I saw a massive change in him after he
Oh,
started
interesting.
that. Yep. And, it just got worse and worse and worse. They say up until, 25, 26, something like that, that stay away.
I think I tried my first tiny little puff of weed when I was 19. It is interesting how we are all wired so differently. For me, in my experience with cannabis, marijuana, whatever you want to call it, um, I don't love the way it makes me feel. I feel very anxious and paranoid, and it makes me somebody totally different. I feel completely out of control, which is so ironic because alcohol actually makes me out of control if I drink too much. And I feel completely in control, but I'm
Yeah.
not. So it's a very, I mean, if I loved the way that marijuana made me feel, I would do that all the time. It's great,
Yeah.
but that's why I like other things.
I was kind of the same way with marijuana, literally until I was probably 18. I probably did weed like 3 times in my life.
Yeah.
Like, I hated it. I hated the way it
Yeah.
smelled, the way it tasted. It's disgusting, but,
Yeah.
you know, my mind's been changed on it a little bit
Yeah.
lately.
And
But,
I'm
uh
open to things too. Like I don't think I don't know about you, but because I've tried it obviously many times and I have had experience where I've liked it. But if I smoke it and if it burns my lungs at all, I'm like, I'm a terrible person. Like, what
Yeah.
am I doing to myself? And I immediately start off my feeling of trying to be relaxed with feeling bad about myself.
Yep.
So if I eat it, I think for me, it's the best, like an edible, if I'm just going to relax and try to go to bed, that's when it's the most beneficial, like in my life.
When did you take this DNA test and for what reason? And what were your thoughts behind it?
So last Thanksgiving, last November, so coming up in a couple weeks, it'll be a year. Ryan's family came from New Zealand and it was his mom and dad, and they came for Thanksgiving. And my mom came as well. Ryan had done 23andMe. I think he actually did it because you had done it. And he was
Yeah.
like, this is so cool. And he ordered it for himself and he did it and he got all these cool traits. I was like, oh, I kind of want to know. Like, that's really interesting. I honestly, in the back of my mind, I've joked about this with people and Ryan before. At that time in my life, I was like, I don't want to take it because I feel like maybe I might have a sibling out there. Just knowing like my dad's life and past and stuff, we had a lot going on. We were moving, we were here, we were there. We had a baby, and I was just like not really having room to have something unexpected happen. So after Ryan did that, I thought, oh, whatever. I'll find out that I don't, my pee doesn't smell when I eat asparagus. Our family was here, my mom and his parents. So on my dad's side of the family, my dad has passed away, which has left not a single living family member. So I don't have any cousins. I don't have any aunts and uncles on my dad's side. I don't have any grandparents, like nothing except me. So my mom is the main person in my life when she was here, we're like, oh, let's give them an early Christmas gift, and we'll all gather around the island and spit in these little tubes and
Yeah.
shake them up. And we made a joke like, let's find out whose parents aren't ours, like as people find out. And then Ryan's dad was having it. He's like, mine's broken. It's like, no, it's not broken. It's just the QR code,
Oh,
whatever.
he didn't want to.
No,
He didn't
no,
want to find out the truth.
no, that's not it. We were joking with them.
Just kidding.
Anyway, so we all did it. Everyone got their results back like fairly quickly, like nothing super exciting. And Ryan was excited because he said that he's more likely to keep a full head of hair. So,
Well,
very
must be
excited.
nice.
So everyone gets theirs back and I don't get mine back. And whatever. So then Christmas is rolling around and Ryan's parents were flying back to New Zealand, and it's a long flight for them now. They're in their mid 70s. And so we kind of came up with a plan. Well, what if we all fly from Vegas to Hawaii and have Christmas in Hawaii? And then they would continue on from there. So it would cut their flight, kind of in
Yeah.
half, their trip. So we get there and we are, I think it was the day after Christmas, we were at Pearl Harbor, and not the best place to take a 2-year-old because, it's like a
Yeah.
memorial and you're supposed to keep quiet. And I have a 2-year-old boy with a lot of energy. So I'm like, I'm going to take him to the car. So I go to the car and I'm sitting there and I open up my phone and it's like, you have a DNA match. What? And I look it up and nobody's around me except Louis taking a nap in the back. And I have a sister from my dad. And I was just like, oh my gosh. I didn't know how to react. I don't know. I didn't really know how to feel. And so then I zoom in on our photo and it only gives you like an age range. So it's like she could be from the age of 40 to 45. And it said she was from Vancouver, Canada. Her name was Louise, which is really interesting because my son's named Louis and the only letters switched are just the S and the E. So then I think like, okay, well, when she logs in, she's going to see that we're sisters. Like, I'm just going to wait till she logs in because I'm thinking, what if her whole life she thought that her dad was her dad? And then I'm like, hey, your life's a lie.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I'm not going to write her because in my mind at that time, my life's not going to really change. Like
Yeah.
I'm still everything. I still know where I came from. I still know, what I'm going to do on Monday. I'm like, I'm going to give her time to reach out to me. Well, a month goes by. I see that she's logged in, but she hasn't written me. So I'm like, oh. So I remember it was like a Monday and Ryan's like, have you messaged your sister yet? And it's like, no, I just feel weird about it. And he goes, how about this? He goes, how about you just message her and say, hey, is there, I said, this is my message. Hey, is there a chance that we have the same dad? It's obvious.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah,
99.99%
yeah.
chance.
Exactly. Is there a chance that we have the same dad? And so then I explained why I took it. I said I was just trying to find out a little bit of like fun genetic qualities about myself. And I did it like as a gift with my family. I said I didn't anticipate having a family member pop up on here. I said, if this message finds you in an uncomfortable position, you do not have to write back. But if you would like to communicate, I am more than willing to communicate with you. So she wrote back and she was so sweet. She said, oh my gosh, I was adopted when I was a baby. My mother gave me up for adoption. She was very young. And my birth mom never knew who the father was. And so she said, I've had the most amazing life. My parents, her adopted parents, are her parents. She goes, my parents are amazing people. I've grown up an only child and I've just had a wonderful life. And I've been using these forums to try to find who my dad is. And so here
So
we
she
are.
knew she was adopted. Did she grow up that way?
Yeah. So eventually her and I decided to talk on the phone. I remember it was a Wednesday. I get home and I'm like, okay. And I just wasn't thinking of like how meaningful this was going to be to her. And so I get on the phone call and she was like, I've been waiting for this like my whole life. And I was like, oh man, like I felt so rude. Like I hadn't like really thought about it, like what it could
Yeah.
mean to her. So she's kind of told me her story. She said when she was really young, her parents told her that she was adopted. And they said, you're loved, you're chosen, you're ours. But if you ever want to find your biological family, we'll help you. So when she got older, she decided she wanted to find, because she had a lot of things about her that were very different, but she didn't know where they came from. So her parents eventually helped her find the birth mom, which was really hard because they didn't have a lot of information back then. Like now, digitally, like it would be so much easier. But she was actually So I'm 39 and she just turned 45. So she's older than me, and we did the math, and it was before my mom. So we were like, oh, he
Yeah.
probably cheated on her, but he probably did, but not. He just hasn't got.
You didn't have a daughter from
Yeah, I
it.
didn't have a daughter from it. So anyway, she ended up finding her birth mom, and her birth mom was an addict on the streets and was very ashamed and didn't want to meet her. So years went by, and her birth mom decided to clean up um, and get sober. And she finally got to meet her. And her birth mom's actually been sober ever since. So I think
Oh,
that's been
wow.
like 14 years or something. And so her birth mom gave her a lot of information about some possible options of who the person was, but not any names. Like it could have
Yeah.
been the person. But again,
Yeah.
they were young and it was like partying, like LSD, drugs, whatever. And her mom was very young. I don't want to say how young she was, but she was very young and uh, I've met her since then. And she's very adamant that nobody knew how old she was and that our dad and her, the interaction was like very like consensual and like good. And, like she said, Luis was made in love, but the birth mom was very thankful to be like, okay, that's who the father is, because
Oh,
she never
wow.
knew there.
Did she remembered who he was or?
Yeah, she did. So Louise kind of goes on to tell me as she was growing up, and her parents confirm this, which is so interesting. She would always tell her parents that she had a sister. And so she would say, like, I have a sister. And they'd be like, okay. And so she always was like very adamant that she had a sister. And I don't know, I can't say that I've ever thought like as a child, these things didn't exist then. So I don't think I've ever thought like I had a sibling. I always really wanted a brother or sister really bad. But obviously, that's not something you can choose for yourself. But
Yeah.
the hard part was trying to explain to her about our dad. So I said, he wasn't a bad person. He just made bad choices. ultimately who he was deep down inside was somebody good, but what he created and put out was not so great. And there was the shining moments, he again, being a good person can mean whatever you want to whoever, but I know that he was good inside. Unfortunately, actions caused by substance made things differently. And so I tried to explain that to her as nicely as possible. And I had to say he was dead, obviously. I know that she was sad that she never got to meet him because I do think that they had a lot of the same good qualities. Like he loved animals, he was a musician. I am not a musician. She is. Like music
Oh,
is
wow.
her life. He was a really good artist. So there's a lot of qualities that they have similarly. But
DNA,
um
buddy.
I know, it's crazy.
Amazing.
So fast forward the story, some months go by, and we decide that we actually want to meet. And so she decides she's going to come see us here because we have Louis and it's just a little bit harder. Louis is 3. So it's just a little bit harder for us to travel. And especially being like, hey, we're coming, we come as a group. So she was here, I think 3 weeks ago, not that long ago. And we meet for the first time. And I go to pick her up at the airport by myself. It's like nighttime, and she'd come from Vancouver, Canada. I'm wearing a flowery dress that Louis picked out, and I have my hair down. We see each other, and she's got black hair, and she's wearing all black shirt, black pants, black sweater, and black combat boots.
Oh, wow.
And we see each other and we just start like laughing and we hug and it was like so special. She's like, we're like the yin and the yang. We couldn't be
Oh,
any more
man.
different. And we look different, but we have some similar qualities. Like we have the same eye color, which was our dad's eye color. So it's kind of like a hazily green. She spent the week with us and it was so fun. I took the week off work and we just kind of got to know each other, went through a bunch of photos. And that part was kind of hard because I had a bunch of baby photos for her of our dad and they looked just like she looked when she was a baby.
Oh,
And
my.
so she'd just been waiting her whole life to find out like these things. And yeah, it was a lot emotionally, but pretty cool.
So, for anybody out there who's researching this video because they're now in the same boat and they have a match or
Yeah.
they're getting ready to meet somebody or they're looking for somebody, what would your advice be? Have you learned anything from your experience that you could share that would maybe help somebody out there in the same boat?
Yeah, of course. So I think my biggest tip would be like if you do find something that's unexpected, there's a lot of situations where it's like maybe one of your parents isn't your parent, or you find a sibling. Like the biggest thing for me is that like I know who I am, and just because I get to be introduced to a new person, and not that you even have to meet them, it doesn't change who you are. But if you're open to it, it could be a really amazing thing because I do feel like genetics are very strong. And so if you're open to it, it might be something worth exploring. I would also say in my situation, I'm very lucky that it ended up being a very good, meaningful, wonderful experience, but to also kind of protect yourself because like really look into the person that might be your sibling or your mom or your dad because they may have had different experiences. And by you putting yourself out there, you kind of open yourself up to all different sorts of people. So just making sure that any situation you put yourself in is safe and do your own online investigation. So many people ask me because it's something that's always pops into somebody's mind when you're like, oh my gosh, you're meeting this person that's a stranger, but you're related to them. The first thing they say, like, okay, well, make sure they're not a murderer, like
Yeah,
like,
seriously.
do they have any things that like might put you in danger? And then the other thing is like, and it sounds so lame, but like financial, like you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you have this new person and they're like, hey, I'm going to play on your emotions and your heartstrings. Can I have $5,000? You
Yeah.
know?
Yep.
So those are the things that luckily for me were absolutely no part of my experience, but it can truly be very cool. It's taught me a lot about how I deal with things. I had a recent experience where I was able to deal with a lot of things that happened to me in my childhood and kind of got a new tool set on how to deal with crazy life events instead of my normal tool set would be like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm not bothered, and just kind of like stuff things down. With this one, I was a little bit more vocal with my husband, Ryan, about like, hey, like this feels a lot for me. And I'm not really familiar with these emotions. Like, can you help me? So, like, asking for help. But yeah, it could be a really cool, awesome thing. Like, I have a new family member,
Yeah.
and from having no family at all, I will take any additional people that are loving and kind in my life.
It's incredible. You never know what the universe is going to send your
I
way.
am. I always say I love surprises. So keep them coming.
So I don't know how much you can talk about it, but
Mhm.
recently you've kind of been through the same healing journey and spiritual journey that some of my other guests have been on, including myself, going down to Costa Rica and experiencing ayahuasca retreat. And from that experience, you based on childhood trauma and stuff like that, the things that you experienced throughout your life, are you able to touch on that at all as far as some of the things you experienced and the type of healing you experienced during that trip, or do you need to
Yeah,
stay away
no,
from that?
definitely. No, that experience is mine and I get to do whatever I want with that experience. So I
Yeah.
can definitely talk about that. Um, Going into it, I honestly I remember you saying I watched one of your other podcasts that you didn't really research anything. I didn't either because I didn't want to have I didn't even want to look up what like the retreat looked like.
Yeah.
Like I didn't want to look up what the lobby looked like or anything. I wanted to have the experience and base it off of whatever. Something for me that I feel was a huge help was the one thing I did do is there were suggestions beforehand on how to prep yourself. I didn't really prep myself mentally because there's no way you can prep yourself mentally for that, but I did try to prep myself physically. I was very strict about the diet that they suggest. The diet they suggest has nothing to do with if a food is good or bad. It has to do with how, when you are going to take the ayahuasca, it reacts inside your body. So I followed the diet precisely. Silly things like limiting garlic or onions. I was like, what the heck? Like, are they bad? So with the diet, I followed it strictly for 2 weeks. And then I also stopped drinking alcohol for 2 weeks before as well, which when I got there, a lot of people had we all had crazy experiences, but
Yeah.
I feel like for me, I got the absolute most out of it because I gave like 110% of what I did have control over. So once I got there, I thought that taking, this drink, the ayahuasca, was going to make me like hysterically cry. And like, I was just going to like have to bring up all these like horrendous things that have happened to me in my life that like I didn't want to deal with, and that it was just going to be an awful, terrible experience that like I was going to come out of it and be like, let my armpit hair grow and like never wear like makeup or do my hair again and just come out like a feral rat, and be like, I don't care anymore. Like, it's
Yeah.
so cool. I also thought when I went in, like setting my intentions, I thought the hardest thing was going to be to forgive my dad. And there's multiple nights in session. So the very first night I went in and I went in like openly as you should. And night number one, I just forgave him. It was just like, oh, here we go. So the thing that I thought was going to be the hardest was the easiest. And it happened for me right away. And it was just like such a freeing, amazing experience. The next parts that follow, like each day, there's really great classes. I went to every single class. Even if I hadn't slept the night before, I went to every single class. And those are when you're in your like sober moments. I gained so much from that as well, like helping me deal with the things that I had felt or saw in the previous night. Dealing with them with medically trained professionals was very helpful for me. The other really neat thing for me, and I'm not sure that this is the same for everybody, but out of the 4 nights, every night I was shown something that the next night was like a worry of mine, but I could always go back to the previous. So it built on itself until like the precipice at the end. And so every single thing was from day one reassuring me up until the end. And I honestly came out of it with every cell in my body being renewed.
So the first night, the ceremony, you started on Monday night, and then you get into the Maloka, and you know, there's mattresses everywhere
Yeah.
and toilet paper and buckets, and it's the vibe is just
Yeah.
crazy. Like, can you kind of go into like a little bit of your experience? Like, okay, you get in there, they start the process, you take that cup and you lay down. Like, what's the
Yeah.
first thing you saw?
Yeah. I would love to actually share because my first, like when I think about it, my first thought was my flights were delayed when that computer software thing happened. And so I was one of the last people to arrive. I arrived in the middle of the night. I didn't see anything on the way there. So I'm like, okay, so I'm going to some weird cult in the jungle. Awesome. I love the place we went, but I think the video in the van needs to be updated.
Needs to be
Um,
updated, guys.
yeah, it needs to be updated just because it was very strange feeling. And I was thinking to myself, like I laugh thinking about it now. I was thinking, oh, my husband Ryan would hate this.
Yeah.
Like he would hate, but anyway, so I end up thinking like, okay, this is making me feel very uncomfortable. I felt like it was like a very religious cult, which makes me religion previously to this made me feel very uncomfortable from personal
Yes.
experiences. And so yeah, I just felt very unsure. Then I go, I get there. Luckily, I got to see you right before everything. So I felt like a little bit of more reassurance, like, okay, I'm fine. Getting to the room, it was beautiful inside and felt very nice and everything. And then I get up in the morning and I start meeting all these different people. And I was starting to feel a little bit more at ease, things like that. But still in the back of my mind, I'm like, ooh, is this for me? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if this is what I have no idea. So then we go to the classes for the day and I'm, like sitting down there taking notes about everything, thinking that my notes are going to help me like control. But it still was helpful because that's kind of how my brain works. So anyway, we get into like the building called the Maloka and we go in and I see all these like mattresses and like buckets and that was everybody's first thing was like in class, like, what is the percentage that I'm going to shit my pants? Like that's everyone's main concern. Like, am I going to shit my pants? And I never shit my pants in my pants. So that's good news. I just,
Perfect.
yeah, I had very good experience. But anyway, so we go in there and it's very weird. You're like kind of looking around. Luckily for me, there was a couple familiar faces and I had known that yourself and Jandy had been there before. So that was really reassuring as well that like, okay, you guys are still alive. This is good news.
Yes. A little
Um,
different, but still alive.
so anyway, you go up and you take your first like cup and it's so gross tasting. It tastes like rotten plums. I wasn't expecting it to be that color, I don't
Yeah.
think. So it tastes like, like gross, whatever. And my favorite thing was watching everyone's faces being like so thankful for the opportunity. Like you take it and you're like thanking the shaman and you like this and you take it and you want to have like this beautiful face and everyone's like, and like
Oh,
walks back to their seat like with this
it's
like,
horrific.
and now it's part of it. And then you go back and I honestly, in those first moments, I don't exactly remember what I was feeling. I knew that I wanted to, I wanted to be an avatar. Like, I wanted to be one with the trees. I wanted to see the most vivid colors. I wanted to have all these things. And that's not what I got the first night. I just saw shapes, but they were black and white. And then I had a couple very strange things happen, but made sense. The only color part was a girl who I later put together was my first friend. She
Oh,
lived down the street from me, and we were at her house, and it was clear as day we're at her house, and her house just opened up like a toy house, and we were inside of it, and I still don't know what all those things mean. I haven't got to talk to her yet, but she's a really cool person that kind of has this spirituality thing figured out more than I do. I
she
need to
showed up to help you.
Yeah, I think I need
Really?
like she was opening the gate for me, like
Yeah.
starting me out. She was my
Yeah.
first friend and then she was my first guide into this part.
Nice.
Which again, I keep being like, "Oh, I need to call her. Her name's Caitlin."
Yeah.
Um, and then there was a situation that had happened with a man that I had met on the trip, and I think I'd shared it with you. But it had made me feel really uncomfortable, and I realized more and more in my life, like even very recent events, that I let people make me feel uncomfortable because I don't want to hurt their feelings.
Mhm.
And I am just such a people pleaser. And even now, like after this experience, I'm still working on things like messed up so many times since I got back. But I'm not perfect, you know? Anyway, in that moment, I'm standing there and I'm thinking, I see this guy. We're like towards the end of the ceremony type thing. And I see him across the way. And I think, you know, that wasn't like, I don't have to accept the choices that that person made. And I start going down this thing of like he made me feel this way, but that's not my fault. Like
Yeah.
that's not my fault that he did that. And then I'm going down this road of like being like kind of acknowledging, staring at this person. And I realize I look at him and I'm like, you know what? I forgive you. You're forgiven. Like I'm actually okay. It doesn't make what you did okay, but I forgive you. And in that moment, I realized that that man, his name is the same as my dad's name.
Yeah.
And so I realized, like, oh, I just got the chills again. I realized in that moment, like, I forgave my dad
Yeah.
and
It's
all the
incredible.
things that had happened to me, the ways that he had made me feel, like, all the things, like, I didn't do them to myself and I didn't deserve them, but they happened. And so I can choose to forgive them or I can choose to push them down and feel shameful or feel angry or feel all these different emotions that don't help me, or I can let them go. And so that was like, and it was so easy. I was like, ah, forgiven. So that was my first night.
That's incredible. And so the rest of the week, we don't have to get into every night by any means,
Yeah.
but
No,
you had a overall a wonderful experience. And
I did.
so somebody thinking about going down to Costa Rica or South America and trying out ayahuasca. I know I was kind of one of the first people in our little circle of
Mhm.
friends who jumped on it, and it was scary as shit. But you looking at me or other people looking at you, since now you've gone, like, what kind of advice?
So that's actually something that I've taken out of this whole process is that, and we're all so different. For me, there wasn't anything else that worked. And so I would highly recommend that if anybody is even thinking or considering it, that it might be for you. The place that we went to, one of the main reasons that that would be my choice is because my mind is very science oriented and I felt safe because I was in like a medically certified setting.
Mhm.
I don't think that I could have had the healing that I did if I didn't feel safe. And I felt very,
Absolutely.
very safe there. If that is the way that your brain works, I would suggest
Yeah.
finding a place that has the resources to make you feel safe because that's the only way that healing can happen. One of the doctors that you and I have worked with, but I've gotten to talk to quite a bit, that's one of the things he said to me is that he's a psychologist and he said, if you don't feel safe, healing can't happen. So I again would highly recommend if somebody out there has pain that they don't know how to deal with, or they have things that have happened to them, or if they just kind of feel lost. Like after being back, again, that tool set that I have for me, it's been breath work. I'd never done breath work before in my whole life. And now it is one of the biggest things that get me through every day because it's like constant guidance and self reflection. Like everything that I need is literally inside of me, like
Yeah.
just breathing. And just having, you don't have to have horrible things happen to you. Like, myself, like, not that we compare ourselves to other people, but my problems compared to other people, I felt were so minuscule. That's why I was like, do I even deserve to be here? Yes, I do. Everyone deserves to be happy. And that is something that this is giving me is happiness and guidance just to be a better human. So if you're looking to be a better human, or if you're looking to change something in your life, another cool thing that I kind of kept in my mind recently is if you don't like what's happening and you keep doing it, that's your choice. It's a choice. So you're making a choice and you realize that that is your reality because you're choosing it. If you want it to change, you have to do something to change it. So for me, this experience was the choice to change.
Well, that is excellent advice, Amanda. I really, really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. Um, we're expecting very big things out of you in the near future. We will tell everybody where this wonderful resort is sooner than later. But thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you and your friendship. And thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Tim.
See ya.
Bye.